Good morning. I'm Heather Staines from Delta Think, if we've not met yet. As I like to say, longtime friend of the Charleston conference, and I'm really happy to be here with you today. This is my first in-person in between. I've done virtual sessions in the past. I hope everyone enjoyed the presentations yesterday. I know that there were many people lingering in the room after the last session, still kind of talking away. So hopefully those conversations continued on into the evening, and you've come today prepared to be just as invigorated and challenged as well. So we have 4 speakers in the session this morning. At the last minute, Marcus was not able to join in person, so it'll be just Toby and I holding down things here in the room, and the other 3 online. When we got together to plan for this session, we really kind of unpacked beyond the journal. What does that mean to everyone? And we think we've gathered speakers that bring varying perspectives to the table. So we are going to set the stage for you a little bit so that you'll know kind of what's behind the expertise of each one of our speakers. So we'll kick off with brief presentations. We're going to start. Hopefully we have the online presenters. We'll be starting with Johan. If we can get, there's Johan. Can you hear us, Johan? If you can start, certainly Johan, with a brief introduction of yourself, and then take it away.
Yes, my name is Johan Roerik. I see a lot of familiar faces in the room. I am the co-coordinator of the European Diamond Capacity Hub and have been involved in various open access projects in the last few years, from Coalition S to Diamas and various other EC-related projects. But right now, I am co-coordinating the European Diamond Capacity Hub with Pierre Mounier. So maybe that suffices as an introduction. I think many people will know me. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the EDCH, very brief introduction, what it is, what the vision is, and how beyond the article, beyond the journal in a way, right? So the idea of the European Diamond Capacity Hub is to develop a strong, coordinated, sustainable diamond open access ecosystem in Europe, and to support various capacity centers and service providers in their mission of diamond away scholarly publishing by providing them with coordination, sustainability, and technical tools and services. Many of you remember the Open Access Diamond Journal study of 5 years ago, where the recommendation was made, look, the diamond landscape looks very fragmented, various large differences between journals in terms of quality, sustainability, and so on. We need a capacity center to coordinate that. And last year we set it up in January. EDCH was born thanks to also a number of projects supported by the European Union. So we provide coordination, support exchange of information, we provide tools and services, and we try to provide sustainability, supporting diamond away as a sustainable economic model. So the idea is really not so much that we give money to the journals, and the publishers, but we provide coordinated tools and services. It's a distributed infrastructure, so that's very different, I think. Governance, it's built on governance and collaboration between, on the one hand, a number of funders like ANR, the French ANR, and CNRS, DOEJ, EFL, FECIT, ISM, Open Edition, Science Europe, Spark Europe, and the Gates Foundation, also University of Göttingen, and funded by the European Union in the sense, of course, that the services we offer were developed in these projects. Geographically, we also coordinate what we call now the national capacity centers. Once the European Diamond Capacity Hub was set up, these national capacity centers sprang up all over Europe. We now have 15 that are established across Europe, and 7 are in the making. And we are going to use these centers to coordinate diamond open access across Europe, because Of course, when it comes to Finnish journals or Croatian journals or Ukrainian journals, we do not have the knowledge at the European level to be able to judge these journals or to help them or to evaluate them in terms of their compliance with a number of standards that we are currently developing. So NCC is really aligned the National Diamond 08 journals and publishers with the EDCH services and standards, as I put on the slide. So this is basically how it works. We have a set of integrated services, 2 services related to community and visibility, a registry and forum where people can come and talk and present problems. We have a Diamond Discovery Hub, which is an authoritative list of Diamond 08 journals that satisfy our 6 operational criteria for Diamond 08. We have about 4,000 journals in that service now, 4,000 of the estimated 11,200 Diamond Open Access journals in Europe, according to the Almasi study. Then we have our Diamond OA standard, which I think is the center of our services in terms of alignment. It's an aspirational standard and benchmark for Diamond OA publishing. And we have a self-assessment tool that allows publishers and also journals to see to what extent they are compliant with this standard, and coming soon we will have a certification framework in the context of a new project that we have. In order to reach this alignment among Diamond Open Access journals, we have improvement services, a training platform, publishing tools, and various resources that can be used after self-assessment to improve the journal and improve the publishing operations as a result. So as you can see, it's a distributed infrastructure at the service of Diamond Open Access journals. It's not obligatory in any way, but we think that Diamond Open Access journals would do well to align with this standard to improve their operations and become more visible. I draw special attention to the Diamond Open Access standard, as I've said. There are 7 components there. There's 100 items, about 100 items that can be that we see compliance with. About half of them optional, about half of them required. It's been translated in various languages, as you can see. An Arabic translation is being prepared. And for us, it really ensures quality and transparency in publishing, governance processes and workflows, and outlines clear items for compliance. So really, it's a kind of a lodestar. It's not an all or nothing test. It is really a lodestar for improvement in the coming years of the Diamond Open Access landscape, where we hope that all journals, whether they are published in Ukrainian or in Finnish or in English or in French, abide by the same standards of open access publishing. So it's a little bit of a different take on this notion of where do we take the journals. We really believe in this distributed infrastructure for journals instead of let's say, the more centralized approach that we sometimes see in commercial publishing. And this is where I will stop with my presentation for now. As I said, I would make it short.
Thank you for sticking to time, Johan. We really appreciate it. Next up is going to be Ludo. Hope you can hear us.
Yes, I can.
Okay, please share your slides.
Yes, I will. Let me go there. Do you see them now, the slides?
Not yet. Yep, now we do. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, even though it's online. So my name is Ludo Waldman. I'm director of the Center for Science and Technology Studies at Leiden University. So we are a meta-research center studying the research system, including also the scholarly publication system. I'm also co-chair of the Research on Research Institute, which, as some of you may know, is a collaboration between a large number of research funders and also a number of meta-research centers, including my center in Leiden. I would like to say something today about the future of peer review. And I will do so based on some initiatives that I'm involved in myself, in particular a report that we actually published just this week, earlier this week. And that report is actually called The Future of Peer Review. And I will also say something about an ongoing initiative at the moment, namely the Published Review Curate Alliance. So I would like to start by raising some issues that I think you're probably all familiar with, so I won't go into any details. I would like to make the claim that publishing is easy, but quality assurance is extremely difficult. So by publishing, what I mean is making things public. Not necessarily publishing in the sense of peer-reviewed journal publishing, but more in general. Publishing is making things public. And this, I would argue, with the technology we have available nowadays is relatively easy, but quality assurance is really very difficult. Even more difficult, I would argue, than many of us often seem to realize. So in my work and also the research that I've done, and I will tell you more about it in a minute, I distinguish between different dimensions of quality assurance, and in particular also quality assurance through peer review. And these dimensions, they all kind of have their own challenges. So the quality of the way in which we do peer review, the quality of peer review reports, for instance, capacity, do we have enough capacity, for instance, to keep the current system, the current peer review system, to keep that running, diversity in the way we organize peer review, diversity along all kinds of dimensions, openness, of course, and finally trust. So these are 5 dimensions where we have very complex ongoing debates about kind of how we do peer review, how we do quality assurance, and whether our current practices are kind of okay, sufficient, or whether they are not really acceptable, not perhaps even sustainable. Some of you may know this graph, which I took from a report published by Silverchair, The Future of Peer Review Report 2025. It shows the acceptance of review requests by researchers that were invited to do peer review for journals that were using the Scholar One system. So what you see in 2018, almost half of the researchers that were invited, they said, yes, I'm happy to do peer review. In 2024, it was 1/3. So what we see is this really steady decline in the availability or the willingness of researchers to perform peer review. This is very much related, of course, to what I refer to as the challenge of capacity. So we seem to have really a big problem around capacity to perform peer review. And capacity, of course, in turn also then affects other aspects like the quality of peer review. If you don't have enough capacity, you end up having researchers, peer reviewers that are not really knowledgeable. And then also the peer reviews themselves are perhaps of low quality. I think you all know this. I think this is not new for any of you. But the big question, of course, is what are we going to do about this? What I see in our landscape, I see lots of kind of initiatives to try to address these problems. In many cases, they are relatively kind of let's say incremental approaches to make things better. And in the peer review report that was published earlier this week by the Research on Research Institute, I'm one of the authors, we try to kind of look at the peer review system in a more kind of from a more longer term perspective, and also in a more systematic way, thinking about peer review not so much about kind of the details of specific problems we are having, but much more system-wide, which means peer review not only in the publishing system, but also in other domains in the science system, like the funding domain and the research assessment domain. And from that system-wide perspective, we have made an analysis of peer review and the future of peer review. I will focus on the publishing domain, but the report actually has a broader scope. So what we claim in the report is a number of things with respect to the publishing domain. So what we say is there's a bit of a problem in the way we sometimes portray peer review. Too often you see that peer review is portrayed in an idealized way, as if the fact that something has been peer reviewed is a kind of an almost absolute guarantee of quality, which clearly it is not. So that's what we call the legend of peer review, which we feel needs to be abandoned. We also think that it is inevitable that we acknowledge the need, the necessity to move away from the norm, the idea that all research outputs need to be peer reviewed. This simply is not feasible anymore. And we argue that this is something we all need to acknowledge, and we need to kind of think through the implications of that, of this point. And what we then propose as an alternative way of thinking about quality assurance is a layered approach. So we say peer review is a kind of a bit of a uniform one-size-fits-all model. We need to move away from that, from the idea that everything must always be peer reviewed in that kind of, according to that same model. And as an alternative, we provide a layered approach in which there's also more room for kind of different outputs being treated in different ways in terms of how quality assurance is done. So what does it mean in practice? It means that you have research outputs which researchers produce. And the first thing that needs to be done is we need to do basic quality checks. So that is not kind of what we normally do in peer review, but this is really checks at a very basic level. Research integrity checks, things like plagiarism, perhaps things like adoption of open science practices, issues related to research ethics. These types of things are extremely important. And for these things, we need to have in place infrastructures that take care of doing these basic checks and providing trust markers to basically indicate the outcomes of these checks. And that provides a very basic foundation for the whole publishing system. On top of that, we need something that we refer to as peer engagement. And peer engagement is not a new thing. It already exists. It's just researchers engaging with each other's work. Researchers do it all the time. And we feel that peer engagement actually could be an alternative for the way peer review is traditionally done. Peer review is bureaucratic. Peer review is kind of something that's at the bottom of everyone's priority list. Researchers don't like it. They put it at the bottom of their list. Peer engagement is something that fits naturally with the things researchers care about. Engaging with each other's work, commenting on each other's work. We should make use of that in a much better way, and we need infrastructures for that. Finally, we need evidence synthesis. For those areas where society really needs high quality knowledge, we need evidence synthesis to bring together the highest quality knowledge from the scientific literature, and that's what we make available to societal stakeholders. So what does it mean in terms of recommendations in our report? For funders, institutions, and publishers, we recommend to work towards a transition from peer review-based publication channels to publication infrastructures based on trust markers and peer engagement. Initial steps could be promoting preprinting, open peer review, and also publish review curate models. And funders also have another thing they should do. Funders should set up dedicated funding programs for evidence synthesis. If we cannot rely anymore on peer review, we need evidence synthesis as an alternative in those domains where we need to provide high quality knowledge to society. And then to conclude, this is a concrete way in which I hope we can actually promote the Publish Review Curate model. This is an initiative that is going to be launched quite soon. The Publish Review Curate Alliance, publishreviewcurate.org is the website, and I invite you all to take a look at that. Thank you.
No, clap for Ludo. Come on. Next up, we've got Toby presenting, and I just want to back up a bit to his slides. All right, can we share from the laptop here once more? No, he's here in the room.
He's here.
Okay.
He's, yeah. This one. There we go.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good morning. Yeah, and I'm very pleased to be in the room with you all. So I'm Toby Green. I'm one of the co-founders of Coherent Digital. You might know me from my many years with the OECD. So I've been in the industry for a very long time. What is Beyond the Journal? Well, here's a list of stuff that, stuff is a technical term, by the way, of stuff that researchers and practitioners and students actually use. So yeah, they use journals and books and preprints and data sets, and they listen to stuff and do dissertations, and they consult reference works, and there are white papers and technical reports, and you can see down the list and all the way down to podcasts and blogs. There's a huge amount of stuff that they use. The blue stuff is mainly coming out of academic institutions. Not always, but mainly. The orange stuff is coming out of what I call real world institutions. So these are institutions that are not universities. And the grey stuff is print. Yeah, there is still print out there that hasn't yet been digitized. Now, the blue stuff at the top, the books and the journals, is part of what I call the publishing industrial complex. Now, some of you may be aware of the military industrial complex, a term that Eisenhower coined back in the 1940s to describe the sort of the virtuous circle between the defense industry, the government, and sort of I forget the third bit, the funders, the government that's the taxpayers, and so you have this sort of circle that goes round, and he actually praised it as being one of the reasons why the Allies won the war, the Second World War, but he also said it's a danger because it becomes a self-reinforcing circle. So bear in mind the circle. So here, the Publication Industrial Index, you've got the same self-reinforcing circle because you've got universities with all the money together with funders, and they're buying books and journals, but they're also using the indices from the books and journals in order to promote the staff. And so the staff are writing stuff and feeding the journals in order to get into the indices so they can get promoted. So you've got this self-reinforcing cycle going on. So just bear that in mind. The upside of all of that is you've got a very formal, centralized, catalogued, and exclusive set of content. So it's all neat and tidy. You can find it. It's preserved. It's got DOIs. It's got everything that the industry creates around that content. But it's exclusive in the sense that the content isn't very accessible to non-experts. You challenge any non-expert to read a journal article. It's also exclusive in the sense that it's very difficult to be published in that system. If you come from outside that system, it's really quite hard to get your content into that system. The other stuff is in what I call the shadow knowledge hinterland. And it's informal, it's decentralized, it's uncatalogued, but it's very democratic. Anyone can access this stuff because it's pretty much all freely available, but also anyone can set up a blog or prepare a podcast. It's very easy to produce content into this system. But the downside is that it is informal. Some of the stuff is really badly produced. It's very hard to find because it's decentralized. There is very little metadata, standardized metadata. This world doesn't know what a DOI is, and therefore that's the downside. So here you have the pluses and minuses of these two sets of content. Now you're probably wondering who's in the hinterland. Well, I used to be in the hinterland because I used to do the publishing at the OECD. The other international organizations are examples of people who are putting out content into this hinterland, the World Bank, the IPCC, among others. And then you've got the NGOs like Oxfam, you've got the non-profits, you've got the NGOs and the think tanks. So you've got people like Chatham House, Brookings. My new favorite one is that sort of M in the middle, which is the Centre for the Midlands, for the New Midlands. This is a very, very small think tank in the middle of England that was born a couple of years ago and has just put out a fascinating report about how you can fix the problem of youth and employment. But this is a typical example of a think tank putting out research that affects real people's lives. But that research is really hard to find and to discover. Now, these two may surprise you because they're also in the hinterland. Universities are in the hinterland because they produce blogs. LSE produces a really excellent set of blogs. But universities are also putting out great literature. They put out technical reports. They create other outputs that are not put in books and journals. And so do the publishers and those. I mean, we've just seen from Leo, he's put out a report about peer review. I bet it doesn't have a DOI. It does. Well, that's fantastic that it does. Most don't. Elsevier puts out lots of reports. I've yet to see a DOI on an Elsevier report. But I bet they don't end up in catalog systems. They're really hard to find. They're scattered about on the internet. So they also are putting out content into this hinterland. And then you've got this long list of, there are governments and there are cities and there are companies and foundations and networks and projects all putting out content into this hinterland. And the hinterland is huge. And I know that because I run Policy Commons and Applied Science Commons. And so far, we've indexed 50 million items into that hinterland from 40,000 different organizations. And some people ask me, well, how much have we got as a proportion of it all? And the honest answer is I haven't a clue because I don't know how big the hinterland is. We're doing our best to add to it, and we're adding new organizations the whole time. And I don't know how many more are out there, but it's a lot. Now, I know what you're all thinking. What about peer review? That stuff doesn't count because it hasn't been peer reviewed. Well, this is what the hinterland does. So these are real examples of what is happening in the hinterland. So Chatham House, they have on their website, you can go to their website, and they actually put out a statement saying that all of their works are externally and internally peer reviewed. And I've looked at their peer review system. It looks just like a journal peer review system. The IPCC, they use that sort of white thing is in fact their workflow showing their review process. It makes a journal peer review system look lax. They have expert review groups, and then they have final working group approval. And that's for all of the IPCC reports. The IEA, and I know them very well, they're part of the OECD, they had the usual set of, they have committees with experts from governments. They check all the work first. It then goes to expert review before it's published. Their big annual report, the World Energy Outlook, has a list of reviewers at the front. Last year's edition had 80 reviewers. Think about that, 80 reviewers. And then my new favorite organization, they have a statement where they say we have editorial control rather than funders. They haven't explained what that means, but there's something going on there to show that they're checking their work before it goes out. And they have every incentive to do so because their reputation and their future funding depends on the quality of what they're putting out. So they're going to have some form of check going on. So it is peer review, but just not maybe as you're familiar with. And the fact is that hinterland content is curated and trusted by a large number of repository managers. So people like me look after things like Policy Commons, but the Confederation of Open Access Repositories is over 100 members of that organization. And here, you know, all of the archive family and all of the repositories, someone is doing something to decide whether or not something should go into the repository. And I'm sure we're all familiar with the fact that archive now is putting in checks to keep the slop out of archive. And then, of course, on the right, you've got here examples of librarians who are curating lists of podcasts and blogs. So they're deciding, yeah, this one I'm going to recommend to my community. So they're doing a form of checking and recommendation, and it's sitting in a LibGuide. So unlike books and journals, all this trust is scattered. It's either on the original organization's website or it's in the rules that a repository manager is following, or it's in an implicit trust in a LibGuide that a librarian has put together. So how can we pull that all together and make it visible and discoverable alongside books and journals? How can we bring this content up and give it its rightful place alongside books and journals, and not, as it normally is put, sort of beside books and journals? And the thing that really irritates me the most is when I see LibGuides that say describing grey literature as not being peer reviewed and therefore not be trusted or to be approached with caution. Well, I think that's a misunderstanding. So that's why a couple of days ago, we launched the Trustmark initiative. This is what we're going to be trying to do with this is to bring all of those trust initiatives and trust signals that are out there together so that they can be read by both humans and critically by machines, in particular by AI engines. So the idea in practical terms, there will be basically a portable machine verifiable token, jargon for a little badge that will go on the content and be in its metadata that you can click on, and that would bring up a certificate that would tell you why this item can be trusted. Because it will reveal, oh yes, this is the IAA report and this is how the IAA does its peer review or its expert review. So it would reveal and make it visible to you what's going on. We showed a proof of concept in May at a conference of think tanks. And on the basis of that, and the results and the feedback we got from them, we're now moving forward with the project. We're appointing an independent standards board at the moment who would come up with the standards. Coherent, my company, will be building the system. To be very, very clear, this is not a Coherent product. This is an initiative for the community that we're simply enabling. It's not going to be a Coherent product. And we're looking for development partners. I'm pleased to see that, pleased to announce that Annual Reviews is our first development partner. And we're aiming for a beta launch at Charleston. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Toby. And our final presenter, I can't speak this morning, is Marcus. We can switch back so Marcus can share. And we can see the slides.
Okay,
Please go
great.
ahead.
Thank you for confirming. Yeah, thank you. And welcome, Berlin from Hanover. And I'm pleased also to be in this room today with you. And I will talk a little bit about digitalization of scientific knowledge, in particular, what we are also doing in the lab. I'm leading the lab knowledge infrastructure at the TIB Information Center for National Information Technology and Natural Sciences in Hanover. And so let me start with telling a little bit what you already know. So what happened in digitalization in the 21st century over the last 10, 20, 30 years. So many of you probably remember maps, right? The printed maps where you used to navigate. Today, you're not mostly not using them anymore. You're using systems like Google Maps, Bing, and so on. That they give you a completely different experience and information awareness of the place that you're in or that you're going to. Not just the quickest path, but the shortest path, but the quickest path, including distance, but also traffic congestion, weather conditions, and so on, reviews of location, restaurants, and so on. And this was made possible by moving the data that used to be in print into databases, but also integrate databases from various data providers. And in science, we have also seen something similar along these directions, digitalization in research, in particular at the metadata level. So we have today identifier systems and registries for all kinds of assets, as well as persons, organizations. And also these are these metadata or identification systems. They have standardized metadata. So DOI, ORCID, ROR here as examples, but also these systems talk to each other. So typically when you submit an article with your ORCID ID, you are notified then by ORCID that the article was published. So you can see that exchange of metadata as well. Also at the data level, in specific communities, we have seen the capturing of what I would call scientific knowledge or information anyway, that is typically encoded in papers as data in various communities. So in machine learning, for instance, there was a nice system, papers with code, where you could see the models that have been developed in machine learning for a particular task, object detection, for instance, and then you could see very easily in the last decade or 2, how many models were deployed, who is currently the leading model, how the community behaved in model development. And you can see this in various communities: social sciences, air quality, invasion biology here. Typically, this is done in the context of systematic reviews that communities do already or groups do anyway, and they collect the data, they extract data from papers, organize this data in databases. The databases be just a CSV file, and then publish this as a service with a web interface on top to at least download and interact a little bit with the data. But there is nothing global. We don't have a global scientific knowledge base. Also, in terms of services, there's been innovation, in particular driven also by Gen AI. Today, you can get summaries of a corpus of, for a question, for instance, based on a corpus of papers. And also these papers might be compared automatically along shared dimensions, and also in the integration between metadata and data and networks. There is innovation in, let's say, discovery of scientific information. However, in the digitalization of scientific knowledge specifically, we haven't reached that as in the mapping, right? So we have here had a digitization over the centuries. So we are printing less. Documents are today born digitally in Word and other toolings. So you have a lot of more possibilities, but the knowledge encoded in these artifacts is not really accessible and processable very easily by machines. So what are we doing? We are rethinking a little bit this with the so-called TIB Knowledge Loom. And what the TIB Knowledge Loom is an open science digital library of digitalized scientific knowledge. So here I'm referring to Luciano Floridi, also the definition of knowledge, or scientific knowledge as systematically accounted research findings. So the research findings are scientific information, but always provided, associated with the evidence in our system currently as a data analysis. And all this description of scientific knowledge as scientific findings plus evidence are open, reproducible research, structured research data. And this system is also professionally curated by data stewards at TIB, so we don't leave the quality control, quality assurance only to the community. So how does it look like for a particular paper? So you have here an article. We focus, of course, on the findings. That means the results. So here typically a figure with some statements in the text. And what we do is we associate now to the article a record. And the record is a set of statements. So that these are the scientific findings as linguistic statements, associated concepts, and also DOI. So you can cite individual statements. But together with the statement, we have also what I called before the account in terms of a data analysis that gives you the evidence underlying this statement, and that the evidence is links to the procedures, so the methods used, the statistical data analysis methods used, the input data, the output data produced, the figures interlinked. So you can see here you have the anchoring between the article and the record here, and you have also the data underlying the figure. So you don't need to extract anything from the figures anymore if you want to reuse this content. Plus, it's reproducible, so you can see here at the bottom, we also interlink the module of code that produces exactly and only this finding, or the data underlying this finding. So why would researchers want to use this? The low-hanging direct benefit here is that you can interlink this record to your article, with your article as a data and code availability statement, also reproducibility statement. I think that's the unique selling point here. And also it's since we are supporting the curation of the production and curation of the data, it's also relatively effortless for researchers. They just need to submit the data and code and the manuscript to do so. That's the short-term benefit here. The long-term vision is that we can support synthesis, evidence synthesis, what Ludo also mentioned before, with improved scientific knowledge reuse. So imagine you have a collection of statements with the machine-readable description of the account. You can reuse this data as input to your synthesis task, implemented typically as a data analysis again. So you get your article, your systematic review or meta-analysis with your figures and results, but associated to this, you can again have a machine-readable description of the scientific knowledge you produce as a derivative of the input. That's a little bit the long vision, and then tracing this, what I call this scientific knowledge journey, is also linked to Leonelli's data journeys concept. Yeah, so takeaways, digitalization is, I think, well on the way, also in research, of course, especially at the metadata with identification of various entities, the interoperability of services. But I think the potential of modern knowledge management really has not been realized here. The technology is out there, is available, but we need to really integrate it in scholarly communication. Thank you.
Testing. Yay. Can you hear me in the back? I don't see the back row nodding. Yes, thank you. Toby, would you like to get a little bit more central here? I want to thank all of the speakers for keeping to a brief period of time so that we have plenty of time for a panel discussion, and we will open that to the audience as well. I don't see any Q&A from our virtual participants, and I do encourage them to put some questions in, and we will definitely take them. So I want to start with curation, and that was something that you were talking about in your project, Marcus. It looks like just a really immense and very worthwhile, amount of work. Are you hearing from other groups that they would like to participate? Would they replicate? Is it scalable? Because it does seem you guys are bringing unique skills to the table, and I'm wondering how you envision wider adoption rolling out.
Yeah, so currently the knowledge loom is indeed running in the first instance at TAB. So this is a relatively recent project. We're up and running since about half a year, and it's rooted in another project called the Open Research Knowledge Graph, which is a bit longer running. But we do have plans to sort of extend this beyond TIB. So one aspect is transferring it as a service into the main activities of the library, but then also beyond TAB and also libraries, to see whether institutions like also universities are willing to either run a loom or contribute to the curation of the data and submit the curated data then also to the deep knowledge loom. There are various models how to integrate, and that's certainly an aspect of scaling this at the global level, let's say, at some point in the future, if possible. So yes, this is something we have on the radar, and we are planning to test here in Germany soon with a small project.
Okay, thank you. And I want to turn briefly now to Ludo. You also talked about curation in regards to the synthesized knowledge that is becoming ever more critical these days. In the context of that framework and that curation there, how is that a little bit different or to what publishers, researchers, and other service providers have done in terms of curation, particularly libraries? Is it, does it replace other types of curation? Is it additive? How do you see that?
I think at the moment we are in a system where we think about curation typically at a bit of a micro level. For instance, the level of an individual article, perhaps in some cases even at a more fine-grained level. And I guess my argument is that we need to make a distinction between different levels in kind of in the way at which we work with knowledge that is being produced, and the types of curation that are necessary or desirable or feasible at these different levels. And I would argue that we need to think more actively about what curation means at kind of higher levels, so at more aggregate levels. So think, for instance, you have a very important societal question, like mobile phones. Yeah, we all know that mobile phones and kids. Like, is that actually a bad thing, the smartphones, or not at all? Well, all parents need to make decisions about this. But what does scientific knowledge tell us? I don't think there's so much value in kind of putting an endless amount of effort in kind of curating individual research articles on that. They will still all contradict each other. What we need is synthesis of all that knowledge, and then making available the best possible answers that science can offer, making that available to society. So in this case, to parents that need to decide how to deal with the issue of the smartphones for their kids.
Yeah, thank you. Johan, when we were planning for this panel, we joked just a little bit about in instances of publish, review, curate, people tend to focus on the publish and the review and less on the curation. Why do you think curation is often something that is less understood or perhaps not mentioned at the same types of levels as the publish and the review?
I'm not sure why that is. I do think it's important to have the publish and review levels first. And in the way that Ludo indicated, I completely agree with him that it's important to have a more differentiated system of trust markers. That's also where I agree with Toby. The curation level is, I think, for people who want who want increased trust markers. I think we should see this entire the publish, review, curate model as a model that really increases the trust as you go up the pyramid, if you like. And first you publish, and there you can publish anything. It's basically like Toby said, you have everything and anything out there. And there should be trust marks for that as well. But the review adds a layer of trust, and the type of review adds a layer of trust, no doubt. Like Toby said, if you have 80 reviewers, you can be sure that there's going to be a very high trust level. And I think curation is that as well. Curation sort of says, look, this has been vetted by trustworthy authors who give their assessment on the basis of the review. So it adds a trust layer. So I think I agree with the previous speakers, with Ludo and Toby especially, that we need to go towards a differentiated system of trust markers, and we don't have that yet, right? I mean, and I don't know how we can do this, but I do think it's a good idea to go in that direction. This is especially important, of course, because Toby was speaking about, the university industrial publishing complex versus all the rest. There is something in between as well. I mean, even though many papers are published by university presses, I think in Diamond Open Access, for instance, there's a lot of journals out there that are published in languages that we don't have access to and that are not necessarily have access to, say Finnish, Ukrainian, and that, we sort of don't see, right? And so they are also in that gray zone, I would argue with Toby. So again, I mean, our task in the EDCH is to make those papers more visible. One of the ways in which this could be done, for instance, in the long term, is to add things like abstracts so that people can discover them. And we would like to build trust simply by service quality already. That is also a trust marker. I think service quality, the fact that that the governance of a journal is open and that people will rotate, that this is not the journal of one crazy professor who does this for 30 years, and who only invites his friends to that journal. I mean, we know such journals. The fact that that the governance is open, that it is democratic, adds a layer of trust. So these are things we need to take into account in notions of trust going forward as well. This is part of what I would call service quality, and it's part also of the Diamond Open Access standard. I'm sorry, I'm going on and on.
That's okay. You're overexcited, so we'll allow it. Okay.
I tend to be, yes.
Yep, we have a few more moderator questions, and then we will go to open the questions online. I do appreciate those thoughts on curation, and I think it is sometimes invisible labor. I mean, I love museums, and when I go to a special exhibit and it has an audio guide, I love to hear from the curator, who put it together, because I then find I can kind of see it through their eyes. Toby, how can we make curation like a first-class scholarly communications object? Like, how can we bring visibility, into that that's maybe been missing?
Well, I mean, I was just thinking that those LibGuides are sitting on various university websites, and the librarian who created them doesn't get any credit for doing it because it's invisible. It's sitting there on the website, unless you stumble across it, you don't know it's there, so they get no credit for doing it. Now, if that was fed into a trust mark, so that the item that they were putting in there has a trust mark, and you click on the trust mark and it would say curated by such and such a librarian at such and such an institution, then the librarian is going to get some credit for having done that work. And maybe that's be a step towards encouraging people to create more. I'd just like to come back to Johan on his the challenge with the sort of Ukrainian and Finnish journals. One of our thoughts with the whole trust mark system that we're building is that in order to generate the certificate, well, we know that a lot of this content doesn't have any metadata. So therefore, we're building an ingest system. So an item would be submitted to the trust mark system. It would be ingested, and we would generate any missing metadata for that item. And therefore, every item in the system would have a rich metadata layer. Now, that it would be so easy for us to, at the same time, create an English language summary as part of that process, so that then those works would get not only rich metadata, but they would get English language titles and English language summaries generated on the fly as they were submitted. That's really doable, very, very easy to do.
And I'll just stick with you, Toby, and let's move on to the changing roles of libraries. And I'm sure we'll have some attendees who want to weigh in on this as well. With the efforts that you're making to make this invisible important part of research more visible, does that change the library's role, or are they really uniquely situated to help bring that forward?
Yes, I mean, certainly with our vision for the trust marks, the trust mark will be issued by somebody. So that somebody has to have standing. So a librarian could apply to have standing, and if they're running a repository, then they can have the ability to add trust marks to the content that they're putting into their repository. So the librarian, their role isn't just looking after the institution repository, which is seen as almost as a labor of love within the institution. Suddenly the librarian is there adding a trust mark to the outputs of that institution that then feed out into the discovery systems that are out there, that feeds into AI engines, makes the librarian quite an important role in managing the outputs for an institution. And I think therefore it does give the librarian a greater role in the system.
And Marcus, when it comes to the future of libraries, you've really pointed to stewardship of data as well as that machine readable knowledge, being a key library function. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you're talking with librarians and working with them in this?
Yeah, so I touched upon this earlier already. So that's something we have in mind, and we have already started since these curation workflows are increasingly well defined. They are becoming routine and also supported by tooling, including Gen AI. So these activities, given data, code, article, can be executed by a data scientist with skill in scripting, or at least reading scripts that already exist, and some statistical data analysis. And they can be executed across subject areas with support support and review by the authors, of course, but the work can largely be done given the input assets. So the idea to install these activities as a central library function, I think, makes a lot of sense, and it's essentially an extension of traditional metadata curation and other activities that are in place, and it's also, I think, on the role of the library in the future. The TIB is also the library of the University of Hanover, and the idea here is really to what if we can operate something like a knowledge layer on top of what already exists on the data layer, so the data repository of the institution where researchers already submit data and code, and we can operate or transform this data layer into a knowledge layer largely as an activity of TIB data curation as a service for the community.
And Johan, the Diamond project is tremendously exciting. I'm particularly eager to have it start and build out further, because I think one of the top questions I get, probably weekly, is how many Diamond journals are there? How can we make sure that we have them? How do we find them? And we know the challenges behind that and the great work that will come. How are libraries, and I want to add publishers into this mix too, because I know we've got a lot of publishers joining us. How are libraries and publishers, contributing to and informing the work that's being done around those Diamond journals?
Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge the work of the libraries, because many libraries actually are active in publishing Diamond Open Access journals. This is generally not known, but one of the things that we found in the Almaty project is, for instance, in Europe, 56% of publishers, Diamond Open Access journal publishers, are university libraries. With another 15% or so by scholarly societies. So libraries are already doing a lot, but most of this work is not coordinated. So one of the things we would like to do, and my colleague Pierre Mounier is going to talk about that at Liber in a few weeks, is to organize the libraries around this, and also set up in the same way that we have national capacity centers, an institutional capacity center network where the libraries would join us in these tasks of aligning journals along this Diamond Open Access standard. So there is really a lot of work before us, but really the hundreds of libraries out there can really make an enormous difference in streamlining the quality and the content of Diamond Open Access journals in the many languages that we have across the world. Like I said, 11,000 in Europe alone. We found about 5,000 in Latin America. 3,000, I think, in Africa, although we already know that it's an undercount. Undercount is about 20,000 journals, not all of them Diamond OA in Indonesia. I mean, we haven't finished the count yet, but there's very likely something like between 70 and something around 60 to 70,000 Diamond journals out there in the world, I think. And I think our task is really to align that not only across libraries and countries, but also across regions. That's why we have the European Diamond Capacity Hub, and Redalica Melica in Latin America, and AGIL in Africa. But we need more of these across the planet to do the coordination work to ensure quality and to have this seal of trust for these publications as well.
With the publishers, and we'll start with the Q&A, open Q&A in just a second. Toby, one of the things that you mentioned is that researchers that end up publishing in these reports and some of the literature you're working on don't go a traditional journal route because it might be too slow, too restrictive. It may have other reasons. But I think at the end of the day, there's no difference between someone who utilizes that content for their research and someone who relies only on publisher content. Is it different users? Is it the same users? And how can publishers maybe look at that as an opportunity?
Yeah, there is one of the reasons why organizations self-publish is that they retain control over what it looks like, how it's written, how accessible the language is. But one of the most crucial things is timing. Organizations like to time when a report goes out so they can align it with their media work, which of course, if you hand it over to a journal, you lose all of that. You lose your branding, you lose the control, and you're shoehorned into a format that maybe doesn't suit you. And that's why a lot of organizations self-publish. As far as the users are concerned, if you just look at the number of citations to grey literature in journals, there's a lot of it. I mean, it varies from discipline to discipline, but the more you drift towards the social sciences, the more citations you're going to see to grey literature. However, I always feel it's an undercount in a sense, because grey literature is so hard to find. A lot of it just isn't cited simply because it was never found by the researcher when they were doing their work, and that's a big issue. And the other issue is the bias against grey literature. I mean, the number of times I hear professors telling their students, they give them an assignment and they tell them only rely on peer-reviewed content. You must only use the journals for this assignment. And it breaks my heart, because you're thinking, what are all about this fantastic content that's coming out of the international organizations? And therefore they're not allowed to call on it. I mean, it's just insane. But that's what goes on, because baked into the whole system is this: the journals have been put on this pedestal, and really, you know, we're never going to knock the journals off the pedestal. So with Trustmarks, what I hope we can do is lift all the other content up to bring it to the same level as the journals.
I have one more quick question for you, Ludo, before we open it to Johan, did you want to come in on that point?
Yes, a quick comment. I mean, the journals, yes, but I would say the English language journals, because I mean, those are the top of the pedestal. Multi-language journals do not necessarily have that pedestal or that visibility. And what we know of the studies also that have been done by my colleague Janne Pöllinen, for instance, is that, you know, the entire gold open access world is a world of English language journals, 96%, and diamond open access is the world of the multilingual journals. And what we also know is that the usage of those journals, those multilingual journals, is really much more by citizens who speak the local languages, citizens, small enterprise, local organizers, things that, I mean, you see a lot of diamond open access journals for practitioners, for instance, nurses, lawyers, water management people, that sort of stuff, you know. And yeah, I mean, there again, it's a pity that is not recognized, that the role of diamond open access and multilingual journals is not recognized as much as that of fancy international journals, which seem to be, you know, the top of the cream that we have treated as the top of the cream until now. So I would go. So I concur with Toby for a slightly different reason.
No, thank you for adding that. That's an important point. Quickly to Ludo, you talked about peer engagement being a necessary component to moving forward with some of these maybe new approaches. The researchers that I talk to are just overburdened and stressed, and now they're looking for more funding, and they probably have their small peer group that they engage with. Can we expand awareness? Can we scale peer engagement? Because I feel like there's just a chain of failed scientist networking platforms that are like in our past. What do you think about that element?
Yeah, I actually think my worldview is a little bit different from the way you just phrased it, Heather. I think peer engagement is already taking place at a huge scale. We have researchers all day reading each other's articles, developing an opinion about that, commenting on these articles on social media, in blog posts, in their own articles which they write, sometimes it's a bit old-fashioned, but in these letters to the editor. There is a lot going on. That's all peer engagement. So we should not, I think, underestimate how much peer engagement we already have. And perhaps the most interesting example is researchers going to conferences. Researchers always say, like, I'm very busy, I don't have time, but they do have time to go to conferences. If there's budget, they go. And that's where they do a lot of peer engagement all the time. they go to this conference to talk to their peers, to have the presentations and the Q&A and all of that. So peer engagement is there, and there is capacity for it, because researchers do it in a way that fits naturally in their own projects, in the things they care about. It's not like peer review, a bureaucratic thing on top of your main responsibilities. It's part of the main thing you're doing, the primary process of science. But there is a challenge, of course. We need to find ways to better keep track of all these things that are happening. So now we don't really properly keep track of it, and therefore it's also hard to rely on all the insights and all the knowledge that emerges from all this peer engagement. And that's where we need to have better infrastructures. And I do want to say that I fully agree with Toby's point about professors who tell their students to cite only peer-reviewed literature. That's really very problematic. That's what I call the legend of peer review. Then you turn peer review into something that it doesn't really provide. Peer review doesn't really provide the level of kind of quality assurance, of the absolute guarantee of scientific quality that apparently these professors seem to believe it offers. So it's very problematic to actually teach our students to do these practices.
And I hear we have a question from online.
We do have, I think, 3 questions online, so I'll start by order. So one is actually a statement that says, curation as a trust maker is the domain of an intermediary that operates in service to something larger than itself. And traditionally, a good intermediary does not pull focus from the purpose of the work. It does. Libraries operate this way, often to our detriment. A good intermediary is part of the infrastructure and invisible. So that was just a statement, but going on to the actual questions. First one's for you, Ludo. Recently, Biology Open launched a paid peer review model, which cuts time to 5 working days. What do you think about this? And they also noted the link as well.
Yeah, I think we need experimentation to improve peer review practices. So I'm happy to see all the experimentation going on, including also experimentation with payments. I think, however, we are also sometimes a little bit confused in the discussion about paying reviewers. My argument would be that in the way the peer review system is now organized, it's completely unrealistic to turn all of that into a system where reviewers get paid. I'm also not sure if it is desirable, because we kind of then make peer review even more a thing that is kind of something that we don't really like, but if we get paid, well, then we will do it. Again, it's this bureaucracy of peer review. I think there's a need for payment somewhere else. We need this evidence synthesis. We need to make sure that we synthesize all the scientific knowledge on particular topics to make that available to society. And that is so important. That needs to be done in a really rigorous way, much more rigorous than what peer review can do. And there we need payments. The researchers that do that work need to be paid. So we need funders that fund projects, and in these projects then evidence synthesis can be done. And the researchers that do that, they just are members of the project team, and well, the project funding covers their salaries.
So I want to say this panel was an absolute pleasure to put together, and one of the challenges with this event is that each panel could probably be a whole conference in and of itself. So we realized that we're, basically scratching the surface. We did not get into discussions around infrastructure, which would have harkened back to some of the conversations yesterday, as well as each of the panelists has specific thoughts on AI. I'm kind of happy that we didn't just go back and do the same, AI discussion again. But thank you guys for joining. We appreciate your time and energy, and I'm sure that if you had questions you did not get to pose, you can reach out to our speakers and they'd be happy to respond. So thank you very much.